So welcome to part 2 of the Hong Kong PhD Fellowship Q&A session. What I'm doing is answering all the questions that you have if you want to apply for the Hong Kong PhD funding that is given by the Hong Kong Research Grants Council to international PhD students. So if you have more questions that I did not answer in my previous video and in this video, don't forget to comment under this video so that I respond to your questions immediately. The first question that I received was, when is the first monthly stipend paid? And this is a very important question. When you arrive in Hong Kong, you will get the stipend at the end of the first month from when the semester begins. So the semester usually begins in September, and ideally you get it at the end of September. But this depends on whether you have your bank account already sorted out. And this is where I had a challenge because it took me quite a bit of time to open a bank account. So make sure the first thing you do when you arrive is to open a bank account, because if your bank account is delayed, your first stipend is going to be delayed. Of course, they'll then pay you a backdated amount. You will still get all your money for all the months whenever you do get your bank stock sorted out. But it will actually affect you if you don't have any savings or you didn't bring any money. Hong Kong is very expensive and you won't be able to cope in those first few weeks of arriving. So I arrived in August of 2016 and I only got the first stipend at the end of September because my opening a bank account was delayed. What you need to open a bank account is a proof of residence letter. So proof of residence needs to be a letter in your name or your utility bill in your name. You cannot use a bill for your flat if you're not the owner of that flat, if the letter is not addressed to you. What I did was I had to contact the admissions department or the registry, depending on which university that you applied to, and by the time you get to this point, you would already know who to contact for certain things. So when you got the offer letter, that admissions or registry office is the one that you continuously contact about your stipend or any challenges that you might be having after arriving in Hong Kong. So make sure you contact your admissions or registry department and ask for a proof of residence letter to open a bank account. So they will write you a letter addressed in your name and send it to whatever residence you're staying in. So if you're staying on campus, they will then send you a letter to your campus address with your name. So make sure you do that in the first week of arrival. Ask for proof of residence letter so that you get the bank stuff sorted early. If you don't get that sorted, that's one of the things that can really delay you from getting your funds. So the other thing I did was to contact the same admissions office to find out, because my process was delayed. As I said, I arrived in August and I only got the stipend end of September. So that's about a month of not having the scholarship funds. I contacted admissions to find out if it was possible to be paid in cash. So this is something that you can also try. Just send an email to ask if your stipend can come in the form of a cash check, and then they can send that to your address while you wait for the bank stuff to be sorted out. That's just one option. I didn't end up getting it cash because my bank stuff got sorted out just that time. I was desperate to ask for cash, but yeah, so I didn't need the cash at the end. So if you're in that situation and your bank stuff is delayed, you can also ask them to pay you out as cash for the first month, but I don't think they'll be able to do that for all the months of your PhD. They can only possibly do that in the first month. And again, it has to go through processes. So they will tell you that they will ask the senior management. So that again might take a bit of time. So you have to be really patient. And in all this time, you probably are running out of money, right? So I only had 500 US dollars that I brought to Hong Kong with me. I didn't know how expensive Hong Kong was going to be. I spent most of this money pretty early on, because then I needed to buy food, I needed to buy bedding, I needed to buy toiletries. So if you can bring all this stuff from home, particularly the bedding and the toiletries, you will save a lot of money, so that you don't need to be spending on that in the early days. Another thing I spent money on that I was not prepared for was a stove, because I found out that I preferred to cook my own food. And this was because I wasn't used to the Asian food. So earlier when I arrived, I was anxious to taste the Chinese food and everything, but then I quickly got that culture shock, and I really needed to cook my own food. Now I'm used to Chinese food, I'm used to Asian food now, but early in those days you might experience the same thing, where you're not really comfortable with the local food, and as you're trying to adapt, you're going to need to probably cook your own food, and that depends on whether it's allowed in your residence or not. So why I had to buy a stove, I found out that whatever stove you find in the common area of the residence, you can't just use it. People here do not share even a stove. So I had to go and purchase my own stove. So in one kitchen, you will find 8 stoves belonging to 8 different people. And I find that really ridiculous. But anyway, I was new to the country, and when you're in Rome, you have to follow what is happening. Yeah, so what I'll say is bring a little bit of cash. I brought 500, it really wasn't enough, 500 US dollars. If you can have at least $1,000 US dollars, I think you'll be comfortable, because you need to also sort out a SIM card. You need to buy an Octopus card, which is around $12 and 12 US dollars. And you can use this Octopus card for your transport needs and to buy food as well, so you don't have to move around with cash. So that those initial payments, when I only had $500, it took quite a lot of money. So yeah, just in terms of your preparation, this is what you need to do. And in terms of the SIM card, as a student, I would suggest that you get a prepaid SIM card, not a contract line, because a contract, then you have to be paying a bill every month. Later, when you have settled in, you can settle for a contract line when your money is now coming in regularly. That's fine. But in those initial days, for you to make contact with your family, just get a SIM card, a prepaid SIM card, so that you can be able to contact your family with the little amount of money that you have. So when you get a prepaid SIM card, you just load it with airtime regularly or buy data. But as long as you're on campus, you'll be on free Wi-Fi. But as you're moving around, you're going to need data. Second question, which banks are good for international students? So since we were talking about opening a bank account and you need a bank account to get your stipend, I would say that all the banks in Hong Kong have pretty much the same procedures for foreign applicants. It doesn't matter which bank, they will follow literally the same procedures because they work with the same regulations in Hong Kong. But try Bank of East Asia, Bank of China, Hang Seng Bank, just to name a few, right? So all these Hong Kong banks will accept international applicants, but also check if you're not from a blacklisted country, because I noticed there are some countries that they have to do extra security checks because of maybe fraud or whatever it is that happens in that country. So there will be a lot of initial discrimination, and this is not from the bank itself, but individual staff members just look at you and they might delay your process because of their own prejudices, right? So if you're brown, if you're from an African country, things like that, you just kind of get stereotyped immediately before people even hear your story. So that's something to be aware of. But if you have all your documents, particularly from the university, it should not matter what country you come from. But then they have to do these extra checks if you're from particular countries. So just be patient and have some thick skin, because they might just do that to you even if you have all the documents, and it's a lot of going back and forth to these banks. Trust me, opening a bank account was one of the hardest things in those early days, because you're just arriving, you don't know anyone, you really don't know how these processes work. So try Bank of China, Bank of East Asia. Hang Seng Bank is particularly good with students, and just be aware of those security checks that they might do. If you have all your documents in order, you have nothing to worry about, particularly that proof of residence, your passport and student card. That's another thing. You need to bring your student ID already. So if you haven't done that process, you won't be able to open a bank account because your passport alone is not going to be enough. All right. So moving away from the bank stuff, someone asked, do I get a rejection email if I'm not successful? And I've seen a lot of past applicants get really frustrated after they applied and they don't hear anything. And due to the high number of applications, I don't think they can respond to every rejected applicant. They only reach out to those that are successful, sadly. So what this means is that you might wait for months thinking that you're still going to get a response, and then just see the announcement that the fellowship awardees have been awarded and your name is not there. So unfortunately, not everyone will get an email. You will only get an email if you're successful. One of the things I would watch out for is whether or not you're invited for an interview, because if you start your application in September and by April of the next year you don't have an interview, that's probably a sign that you were not shortlisted. So most people would be invited for an interview as early as December, January. They're already doing interviews. So by April, if you have not done an interview, you're probably not successful. So don't wait all the way up to June when they make the announcement to ask whether you got it or not if you never received an interview. And another thing is to obviously contact the department that interviewed you. If you see that there's been a delay in getting a response after the interview, you can always contact them or the potential supervisor if you know who they are, and just ask if they're still considering applications or what is happening if you haven't heard from them. But in most cases, you will not get a rejection email. They will just contact you if you're successful, unfortunately. So this was just a short video to answer those 3 questions regarding the bank account and your stipend and whether or not you'll get a rejection email. If you have more questions and you're applying, drop them down in the comment section or contact me directly. I'm always happy to assist, especially with this Hong Kong PhD fellowship. And I wish you all the best with your application. See you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.